5. The Titanic disaster story. 100 years before James Cameron turned douchebaggery into an art form at the Oscars, American author Morgan Robertson wrote a shitty book called Futility, or The Wreck of the Titan, about the sinking of an unsinkable ocean liner. When you see the cover, you figure you're pretty clearly looking at a fictionalized version of the Titanic story. He was so eager to be first, apparently, that he didn't bother to wait for the Titanic to actually sink before writing about it. The Wreck of the Titan was published in 1898, 14 years before our MS Titanic was even finished being cheaply built. The similarities between Robertson's work and the Titanic disaster are so astounding that one has to imagine if White Star Line built Titanic to Robertson's specs, S.A. there. The coincidences don't end there. Both sank 400 miles from Newfoundland, both had too few lifeboats, both were around 800 feet long, and both sank in an April night around midnight. 4. Nebraska Church Explosion, 1950. As unbelievable as this story is, it did happen. Even though a Nebraska church exploded one evening, in 1950, just 5 minutes after choir practice had been scheduled to begin, not one of the 15 people who should have been present was injured, because none had yet arrived when the building collapsed. Choir practice at the Westside Baptist Church in Beatrice, Nebraska, always began at 7:20 on Wednesday evening. At 7:25 p.m. on Wednesday, March 1, 1950, an explosion demolished the church. The blast forced a nearby radio station off the air, and shattered windows in surrounding homes. But every one of the choir's 15 members escaped injury, save by a fortuitous coincidence. All were late for practices that night. Considering the sanctified site of the explosion, it was not surprising that some attributed the near miss to divine intervention. They supposed rightly that the odds of unanimous tardiness were slim indeed, especially when the reasons were examined. Car trouble delayed 2 women. The minister and his wife and daughter were delayed by a dress that needed ironing at the last minute. Others were late because they paused to complete homework, finish a letter, or hear the end of a favorite radio show. One awoke late from a nap. Some could think of no special reason, they were just late. It is impossible to calculate precise odds for all these events occurring at once. But past performance indicated that each person would be late for practices one time, and for producing a 1 in a million chance that the entire choir would be late that night. As to what those reasons were, whether they were of the garden variety or divine intervention ilk, judge for yourself. 3. 2 brothers, killed by the same taxi driver, 1 year apart. In July 1975, a sad and incredible accident happened. That day, Erskine Lawrence Eben was knocked off his moped and killed by a taxi in Hamilton, Bermuda. The accident is so incredulous, because it was the same taxi, with the same driver, and carrying the same passenger, that had killed his brother, Neville, in July the previous year. Even more incredible is that both brothers were 17 when they died, and they had both been riding the same moped in the same street. Even more incredible is that both brothers were 17 when they died, and they had both been riding the same moped in the same street. The story, often termed as the coincidental twin tragedy, was also mentioned in 2004 bizarre collection of Ripley's Believe It or Not book. 2. Anne Parrish, Lost Novel. This is one of those classic coincidences which seems to check out okay. It's about the American author Anne Parrish. She wrote novels and also children's literature, such as Floating Island, and lived from 1888 to 1957, so, yes, it's an old coincidence. In the 1920s, Anne was in Paris with her husband, the industrialist Charles Corliss, and they were browsing the local bookshops. While doing so, she picked up a well-worn copy of one of her own childhood all-time favorites, called Jack Frost and Other Stories. She handed the book to her husband, saying how much she loved the book as a child. He flipped open the book, and to their amazement, on the flyleaf was written, Anne Parrish, 209 North Weber Street, Colorado Springs, Colorado. Yes, it was her very own book. Goodness knows how Jack Frost got to Paris, but it nicely linked Anne Parrish with her childhood. 1. The unsinkable Hugh Williams. Over a period of 200 years, 3 ships perished at the same location of the coast of Wales, on the same day, December 5, and all three had only one survivor. The three survivors all had the same name, Hugh Williams. December 5, 1664, a ship sunk in the Menai Strait, a stretch of water with tremendous tidal swings off the coast of Wales. All 81 passengers died, except one. His name was Hugh Williams. On December 5, 1785, another ship sunk in the Menai Strait, with again everyone aboard dying, except for one man, named Hugh Williams. And then again, on December 5, 1820, yet another ship sunk, in the Menai Strait. Only one man survived, and he was named Hugh Williams. This is an awesome legend, and the scope of the coincidence is staggering. Another source actually references 2 other British shipwrecks, with the lone survivors, bearing the name Hugh Williams, except they weren't on December 5. In one of those wrecks, there were actually 2 survivors, an uncle and nephew, and both were named Hugh Williams. And so despite having 2 survivors, you could still technically say of the wreck, the only man to survive was named Hugh Williams.